Hey guys, it's time to Nefis and chill, and in this video I'll be covering one of the most powerful item sets you can use as a healer in the Greymoor patch in PvE raids. It's called Roaring Opportunist, and we'll be going over how it works, what classes it's best on, and a general skill, passives, raid and itemization composition checklist to understand how to make the best use out of it for your raids as a healer. Before we move on to the rest of the video, make sure you guys check out Style Anima, one of the best endgame healers who recently got the world's first Kyne's Aegis no death hard mode speedruns, and also displays how well you can use the Roaring Opportunist set in a couple of her videos. She's also an ESO University professor and has helped a ton of healers out, so definitely make sure to subscribe to her channel to show your support. Now, Roaring Opportunist again is one of the light armor trial sets you can get in veteran Kyne's Aegis or normal Kyne's Aegis if you don't want the perfected. Ideally, you want the perfected, as I'll go over why. And in terms of the item set bonuses, we have the 2-piece bonus of Spell Penetration, 3-item piece of Minor Slayer, 4-piece bonus gives us spell damage, and the 5th piece bonus is an extra light and max Magicka, which I think in terms of min-maxing, you should definitely go for. The 5th piece item bonus, regardless of whether it's normal or non-perfected or perfected, is going to be using a fully charged heavy attack grants you and up to 11 group members within 28 meters Major Slayer, increasing your damage done to dungeon, trial, and arena monsters by 15% for 1 second for every 8,000 damage dealt. Roaring Opportunist can only affect a target every 22 seconds. The minimum duration of Roaring Opportunist is going to be 5 seconds, while the maximum duration you can hit is 12 seconds. This last part of the tooltip is really critical to the set, because basically what it's saying is for every 1 second you want to gain on the Major Slayer uptime during raids or boss fights, you have to hit another 8,000 damage. So 8,000 damage times 12 seconds is 96,000 damage upon 1 heavy attack. However, we are going to be pairing this, or you should be pairing this with Jorvuld's Guidance, because Jorvuld's Guidance, 5th piece bonus, is increase the duration of all major buffs, minor buffs, and damage shields you apply to yourself and allies by 40%. In total, your maximum uptime with at least a 96,000 heavy attack damage hit is going to be 16.8 seconds on Major Slayer. This is pretty significant because that's 16.8 seconds of Major Slayer along with a 22-second cooldown. That's like 5.2 seconds of cooldown basically, and you can pretty much keep up at like easily if you can hit all the heavy attacks well, and we'll be going over how you will do so. At least like 40 to 50% easily. You can definitely go higher than that in that fight. So Major Slayer is a very significant buff you can provide to your DPS, and this is basically going to not be accurate to show on the raid dummy here, because the raid dummy is lacking major vulnerability, martial knowledge, minor courage, Zen's redress, and so forth. And you'll notice by now that I am actually a Nightblade healer, and this is a pretty cool thing because Nightblade healers have not really been a part of endgame Magicka DPS compositions or even stamina DPS compositions really. We've seen Sorc, Templar, Warden healers make compositions. We obviously Templars, Warden, Sorc, even Dragonknight healers to a certain extent with MK Zen have been pretty popular. Even Necromancer, Nightblade seems to be the only odd class out. But with this item set, you can definitely Nightblade heal. It's actually strongly recommended you be a Nightblade healer. While you can use Roaring Opportunist on like a Dragonknight or a Sorcery healer, it's probably the easiest to use, and I'll explain why. In terms of the itemization for your healer, you're going to have 5 Jorvulds on Jewelry, Body, and 5-piece Roaring Opportunist on Body if you want to use the Master Resto staff. And there's no reason why you shouldn't use the Master Resto staff. This patch, it's still strong, provides sustain for the rest of the group. In addition, you're going to have a Maelstrom Inferno staff. Whether it's perfected or non-perfected doesn't really matter, and I'll explain why. For the traits on your armor pieces and enchantments, you're going to have Max Magicka and Divine's trait. For your jewelry, you can try out Infuse, but the Arcane is going to help out with your sustain because we're going full damage, putting all the cards down on the table. There's no half-assing this. There's no, okay, I'm going to build for some mag recovery here or put a magic cost reduction here. No, you have to go all in with this build. You have to hit that 96,000 damage minimum for that 16.8 seconds of Major Slayer. If you really want to make the best use out of the set, you have to go all in. It sounds scary for a lot of healers, but it's not. Basically, the concept still remains the same for ESO raids. The faster you kill the thing, the safer it is. So that's part of it. You may be also wondering why Martial Knowledge and Zens is not on the healer then. Typically, basically the Roaring Opportunist and Jorvuld setup has replaced the Martial Knowledge and Zen healer. What you're basically going to do now in terms of Magicka DPS compositions is going to be putting the Martial Knowledge and Zens on probably a DK DPS, a Magicka DK DPS. In terms of why this is used for Magicka DPS rate compositions and not Stamina DPS rate compositions is because Stamina DPS will have Locust Ds. Locust Ds will grant them a Major Slayer proc or duration when they synergize things for 10 seconds. The Magicka DPS don't have Locust Ds. They don't have Locust Ds, so they depend on either things like Master Architect or this set. Now, you could still run 2 Master Architects in the group, but you can still easily hit a pretty high uptime on the Major Slayer with Roaring Opportunist as a healer. And I would say Roaring Opportunist is probably more worth it than bringing in 2 Master Architects on 2 different DPS. That's a DPS loss. So this is all about how much you want to min-max for your composition. In terms of traits for your Resto Staff and Inferno Staff, the Master Resto Staff is going to be infused. And this is, again, you got to think about, okay, I want to boost my damage as much as possible, so you want a Berserker enchant, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 452 for 5 seconds once it procs. And of course, that's boosted by the infused trait. The Maelstrom Perfected Inferno or Non-Perfected Inferno is going to have Nirnhone, which increases damage of this weapon by 15%. You don't have to do Precise or whatever, because as I'll show you. So Nirnhone is probably the next best trait. In terms of the enchantment, well, it depends on the boss fights, of course. Like if it's a Daedric or Undead boss, such as Rakat, Storm and Stone Atros, and so forth, in AA and Maul or whatever. You could do Prismatic. Otherwise, you can do whatever glyph that may best benefit both yourself or the group. So now that we've talked about that, we'll talk about why we are Nightblade, because we kind of touched on this. Now, in terms of attributes, again, you're going all out. 64 points in the max Magicka, and these are roughly the stats you'll get. And once you are in a raid with minor toughness or Warhorn, these are the stats you'll have once you get into the trial, once you get into the raid. The Magicka is decent, the max Magicka is pretty high, as you can see. Max health is still pretty decent, and max stamina is about 10,000, pretty normal. In terms of spell damage, this is going to go up significantly once you have your Berserker damage enchant procced, and once you have, yes, a vampire skill active. So I feel like we're going all over the place right now, but let's just go over the Nightblade first. So the Nightblade. Why the Nightblade? Well, it's primarily because of Shadowy Disguise. Cloak yourself in shadow to become invisible for 3 seconds. Your next direct damage attack, used within 3 seconds, will always be a critical strike. This means no matter how low or high your spell critical is, doesn't matter if it's 10%, 90%, if you use Shadowy Disguise, your next heavy attack is going to be a guaranteed crit. An interesting thing about this skill actually is that while you charge up your heavy and then activate the cloak, as long as your cloak activates before your projectile hits the boss or target or whatever you're targeting, it still counts as a crit. So let me show you an example. Just like that, guaranteed crit. Now again, there's also other reasons why you'd want a Nightblade healer, because it's pretty much a very significant DPS boost in terms of passives. Not only do you get things like Magicka Flood, where you get an additional max Magicka by 8% with a siphoning ability, which is here, siphoning attacks. You also get 20% more damage boost from your attacks for 6 seconds if you use Incamp. This is probably gonna be the go-to ult for a lot of cases if you want to guarantee that 96,000 hit. because which will mean you'll probably have to forego a horn on the Nightblade healer. Plus, the Incapitating Strike is gonna give you Reeve, which restores 100 magic and stamina when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack, in addition to Siphoning attacks, which also grant you both magic and health for 20 seconds upon every light and heavy attack. Bonus points if it's heavy attacks, and you also get a ton of sustain back after the end of every Siphoning attack's duration. And it's just such a nice class toolkit to work around with. And you also have the option of major evasion for certain fights. This can be slotted out for things like a shadow ability such as Dark Shade. You may have noticed some Nightblade healers wearing Dark Shade, and this is in part because of Dark Vigor, or just because it's a flex slot. It really depends. You can do like Radiant Regen if necessary, but that's just something nice to know. In terms of your skills, Illustrious Healing, Combat Prayer, Orb, and I mean these three staple healer skills are still necessary. You're not going too all out. You're not going to be a martial Zen healer, but you're still going to have, even as a martial Zen healer, you still did have Combat Prayer and so forth. Your choice of orb morph is going to depend. So if you basically want more healing in the group, depending on the content or how challenging it is for your group, Energy Orb for sure, Mystic Orb if you think you can get away with it. But typically I think Energy Orb, because we're going to get into the next skill line or skill here, Simmering Frenzy. Now Simmering Frenzy is one of the new vampire skills. It's actually one of the two morphs. Frenzy allows your monstrous appetites to take hold, increasing weapon and spell damage by 660. While toggled on, the health cost of this ability increases by 20%, and the weapon and spell damage bonus increases by 10% every second. I mean, this is a very, very easy skill to heal through, especially as a healer. I mean, I can just show you right now while we do this. But earlier, I could reach like 5k spell damage while healing. And in raids, this is just going to also help guarantee you hitting that 96k minimum 40 Major Slayer. It's just going to keep going up and up. Plus, you also need to learn when to proc it and when not to proc it. So this is going to take some practice for sure. This set is going to definitely take some practice for sure as a healer. And the next skill, again, we went over the Shadowy Disguise, primary reason why you'd want to be a Nightblade healer, just to guarantee that crit. I mean, let's just think about if we did, the Thief Stone, we'd have to think about, okay, how do we boost that crit then? Even if we do the Thief Stone. That's why we're going with the Shadow. That's why I have full Divine traits, just to boost the crit damage from the Shadow Mundus. So that's why we're going with the Cloak. Guaranteed crit strike, boosting that crit damage, building as much max Magicka and spell damage as possible through skill, stats, and so forth. Speaking of stats, it's probably recommended that you go High Elf for this spec. You can probably get away with Breton, but the High Elves do get an innate spell damage bonus of 258, and that's going to help as well with making sure you hit that minimum 96k heavy attack damage. The Unstable Wall of Fire morph is going to be probably the preferred choice here, because for both, basically, you're speccing as a DPS essentially with some rest of staff healing abilities, or just a couple or a few healing abilities. For trash, it's pretty nice, and for boss fights, it can be pretty nice as well. It also lines up really well with the other timers, from what I've noticed. So that's what I would recommend. For the Siphoning Tanks, we already talked about this. It's also for the Magicka Flood passive and so forth. Barbed Trap. So this is going to be dependent on the fight, of course, but Barbed Trap whenever you can. Otherwise, Channeled Acceleration. Incapitating Strike, we touched on this earlier. Note that it's a pretty low cost ultimate. As a healer, while you're healing, plus light attacking, plus, basically doing everything as a healer you should be doing. In addition to the Catalyst passive and so forth, you're gonna pretty much have this ult almost off of cooldown, and it's a pretty strong ult. Again, it boosts any damage done from your attacks for 6 seconds by 20%. So this is all gonna line up. All of these skills are gonna line up with making sure you hit that 96k minimum. Now you probably have some questions. I've been getting questions from other people about Roaring Opportunist and other alternative things you could do with it. And one of the questions is, well, why not a lightning staff? Why a fire staff? Well, let's go over the destruction staff passive. For Trifocus, a fully charged flame staff heavy attack deals 12% additional damage. While this is good, a lot of people are thinking, well, wait a minute, why don't I just channel on a mob or on a boss? Like, the ticks would be insane, right? Each tick would proc Major Slayer, or each mob would proc Major Slayer, whatever. But the proc of Roaring Opportunist only activates off of the last tick of a channeled attack. So it's only going to basically proc off of the last tick or the finishing tick of the lightning staff charged heavy attack, and so forth. So that's why basic lightning staff heavies won't really work, because only the last tick applies for Roaring Opportunist. And Empower, like, so you gotta read the tooltip very closely, because a lot of people will point out, well, why not use Entropy or something for Empower? But remember, guys, Empower only buffs your next light attack, not your next heavy attack. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You want to make sure you have all your passives. You want to make sure you have your potion passives, high elf, destro staff passive, resto staff passives, and so forth. All your class abilities and passives. Blue CP is gonna look roughly like this. You could probably make some adjustments, and I'll go into why I mentioned the whole perfected and non-perfected Inferno staff. 66 Elfborn, 64 Ellie, 74 Staff Expert, 66 Master Alarms, nothing in the Dominators. Remember, you're basically just boosting your heavy attack damage. So why 0 Spell Erosion? Well, you can definitely, I think, could go up to 15 Spell Erosion. However, that depends on your raid's buff and debuff uptimes, such as Linebreaker, or primarily debuff uptimes like Linebreaker, Crusher, and so forth. But we also do have the option of the Maelstrom Perfected Inferno, and we also have the 2-piece bonus already of Spell Penetration. So this is actually going to significantly lower the need for Spell Erosion on this spec. The Maelstrom Perfected Inferno also provides 1,190 Spell Penetration. So in really, really optimized groups, I don't think you'll need any into Spell Erosion. Obviously, this will depend on the group, so I'll check your debuff uptimes and so forth to see what kind of Spell Erosion you may need. I would probably spec a little bit less out of Staff Expert and Ellie Expert in the event that you do need a bit more Spell Erosion. Note that when you use Vampire abilities now, unlike in the past, using them will not increase your Vamp stage. And I would highly recommend that you remain at stage 1 with the spec. The more higher you go, the more severe the cost abilities are. So yeah, that's probably gonna play into maybe you not using Warhorn at all, and instead actually slotting Incap. You're gonna be using Incap most likely anyway, instead of Warhorn to boost your damage. But yeah, you definitely want to stay at stage 1 Vampire. Your ability cost goes up the higher you go. It's just not worth it. Your health recovery gets penalized, and you receive more additional flame damage. One last thing I want to mention before ending this video is that there is currently a bug where you can combine Roaring Opportunist Perfected with non-perfected Roaring Opportunist. This is a bug. A lot of people have been asking me about this too. It's not intended. It's obviously not. That'd be too OP. So even if you're using that setup, don't expect it to, be that way forever. Now, why a healer and not a DPS? So this is a point of contention between, I feel like, the endgame community and the devs. No matter how hard the devs try to classify this set or even other sets as noticed under Greymoor patch notes, like they describe some sets like as a healer sets or tank sets, not light armor sets or heavy armor sets. What they desire when they design these sets or skills, the goal sometimes just doesn't match up with what players can do by going above and beyond. Like a prime example besides the Roaring Opportunist set here is that Stone Giant. It's a prime example where it's become a clunky skill for any PvE or PvP Stamina Dragonknight to use, just because it's used by PvE tanks and keeping up Stagger uptime. Despite the changes to that skill, or whatever other thing may come, players still exceeded or may exceed expectations, and are still using them in what the devs view as unintended, which I believe personally shouldn't always be like that or fought against from the dev side, but more celebrated or at least acknowledged, especially when you look at other games where the devs are more pleasantly surprised and acknowledge speedrunners or other players of that kind who went above and beyond. But yeah, that's about it for the Roaring Opportunist. If you have any questions about this set and how it works, let me know down in the comments below, or join the ESO University Discord. Also, again, make sure you go over to Style Anima's channel to see how she's pretty much perfected the usage of it, and give her a follow. Stay safe, have fun, and see you guys next time.